Take two. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Worship Guitar Show number 32. We are focusing on what's new, what's not, the latest, and the greatest. There are so many things happening right now in the world of gear. There are so many things happening in the world around us that the pace of things has reached a fevered pitch. And sometimes kind of finding that perspective is a little bit of a challenge. So I certainly know that I am busier than I've ever been, but at the same time, in the seasons of busyness, that's generally where God is really kind of growing us. So I would love to kind of hear where people are coming up against, if you will, some brick walls, and also would love to hear some victory stories of stuff that you're like, that's in the rearview mirror. Before I do that, let me just say hello to everybody. Lonnie, great to see you. And Brad, what's happening here? And Nicholas, and awesome. Deanne, awesome. Right. The Aussie, got it. Tampa, Connecticut, awesome. All right, great. A little 3.0 action, yes. For those who don't know what the noise about 3.0 is all about, that is Line 6's new firmware for Helix and HX Stomp, and that is out and about, and people are rather excited about that, including myself. I will be shooting a video for that on Monday, and I'm actually going to have the privilege of being joined by a very special guest from Line 6. I'll just leave it there. All right, so here's the thing. With all this stuff going on, staying centered, North Central Washington, very nice. Staying focused, staying on top of what's relevant, what's not. The interesting thing is that this is the voice print DI from LR Bags, and what is so exciting about this box is it's really, to the best of my knowledge, the first time that a major manufacturer has gone all in on releasing an IR product specifically for acoustic guitar. We are at a point now where this technology is all around us. I've been spending a bunch of time working around the Bosch GT1000 Core. It's this little baby piece of magic that is so incredibly powerful, and the fevered pitch, which is going to be the phrase I'm going to use repeatedly tonight, of where things are at right now, it's kind of exciting and a little intimidating to just kind of know what you need to know. For example, let's roll the clock back 30 years. Latest and greatest. Greatest does not necessarily imply the latest, right? So let's take classic Strat. When I was but a wee lad, I would go into the stores and the guys behind the counter would tell me that was this Strat was better than that one. They would explain why, so on and so forth. So what makes a Strat great these days is still the same thing that generally made a Strat great back in the day. But the thing is, the other gear that's out there, there's generally a much greater depth of field that you need to know this stuff. And so one of the things we're going to be doing, what's going on, Forrest? Hey, from California to Buffalo. One of the things that we're going to be really making sure we do a much better job of doing at Worship Musician is doing a ton of worship musician demos specifically for worship guitar players. And we're missional about serving you, I should say us, better. And so it's going to be an awful lot of fun. So first of all, what's going on, Chris? How you doing? Great to see you. I would love to have any questions that people have about any piece of gear that, good, bad, in between. It's just, it is all around us, and it is all incredibly awesome. So, but that said, the interesting thing about the little journey I've been taking with the Bosch GT1000 Core, for those of you who don't know, this is kind of a funny story. It's show and tell on myself. So the deal is that I have been making a video about using the GT1000 Core as the centerpiece of a pedalboard for the better part of 2.5 weeks, when ideally it was supposed to be a video that was supposed to happen once a week. I'm late, but it's because of the fact that as I dig deeper into this little piece of magic, it's revealing more and more of itself. And as I want to give people some suggested best practices about how to get an immersive experience with it, I found that it's taken more and more banging of my head against the wall, finding out what it does and doesn't do, and then finding the workarounds for it. And the interesting thing is, I basically read the manual. I have learned a ridiculous amount about it, but in the process, I've also learned a lot about MIDI that I sometimes have a tendency to forget. So the interesting thing is that I found myself in this, the steep learning curve myself, and you feel like you're falling backwards. You know that feeling? You're like, oh no. But in the process, one of my biggest missions to serve you and to serve all the people that I make gear demos for is to give them, basically to serve them and serve you as you're on your mission to find that thing that you're looking for. We know that worship musicians don't just play at church. There's, the other 6 or so days that, we're at home. We are obviously, a certain amount of what we're doing with our instrument is pointed upwards. A certain amount of what inspires us is coming, if you will, from above to where we are. But there are times that we're just kind of playing guitar because we love playing guitar or bass or whatever the instrument is. And with that in mind, we want to find, I won't say the quickest path to quote unquote there, but paths that make sense, right? And so some best practices are great. So I am still looking for some questions here, but I'm not seeing them. So I'm going to jump right in and do a little teaching on Pedalboard Magic because I can. So let me get this pedal board in frame here. And we're going to talk a little bit about this particular box, not just for the sake of this box, but as if it were an HX Stomp or anything like that. So let's head over here and let's see how centered in the frame I am when I go over here. Not very, but we can fix that. There we go. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, oh, look at that vintage fuzz face just hanging out there. You know what? I'm going to leave that guy right in frame for right now. Okay, so here's the deal. There's lots of goodies hanging out here that I want to walk you through because it's relevant to the conversation of what we're all going to be doing as we become more exposed to devices like this. And again, you could just think of this as an HX Stomp, an FM3, whatever multi-processing effects, amp modeling, whatever processor you want it to be. But in many ways, you're seeing kind of the birth of what I think is going to be kind of the next generation of what we're going to be needing to pay attention to. So I'm going to walk through a little teaching thing about Pedalboard Magic as it relates to the house of worship. And if somebody has a problem with that, drop me a line in the chat and just say, Doppler, keep it short. All right. So here's the deal. There are a couple of really important things about the way a bunch of this stuff works. Hang on a second. What do I think? Hang on. I got a question here. Come on, Chris. Let me get down to that layer. Okay. What do I think of extended warranties that most retailers offer on gear? That is a brilliant question. As a general rule, it's a total ripoff. And I will say this, Chris. When was the last time you had a piece of gear that didn't kind of... Hang on. Let me face you face to face here. It's a great question. When was the last time you had a piece of gear fail within the first year or two being outside of warranty? That generally is a very rare thing. Most of the time, if it's going to fail, it fails within the first month, maybe 2. And if it fails later on, it's much later. And, this is where maintenance and just taking good care of your gear actually matters. It's a great question. As a general rule, I am not a fan. It's a great way for folks to make a little extra money on a transaction. Generally, I would not suggest doing it. There may be some exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, not. All right, heading back into the board magic. Okay, so one of the interesting things about a device like this is this is basically the main volume control. And if you were to run this into a PA or your DAW, you can basically use this night and day at whatever level you want. And there's some output settings here. You can kind of set it for the appropriate output. Well, destination, not source. There you go. So the thing is, if you're going to run this, though, into the front end of your amplifier, that's where it becomes a little bit of a problem. So the idea is that, generally speaking, like you would do on HX stomp, you would use one of the internal loops to hit the front end of your amplifier, and that way the level is right for the front end of your amplifier. All right, we're just going to leave that piece there. But here's the deal. Just imagine this is any small format amp and effects modeler. Now, because there's a limited number of loops, one of the things you can do is actually run a stomp before the unit. One of the other things that you can do, especially when you start using the loops to send to one, or in this particular case, 2 amplifiers, is you can actually place your time-based effects, like a reverb in particular, after this unit, especially when you control something like that via MIDI. Now, speaking of MIDI, watch this guy very closely. Look at this fancy stuff going on here. I love MIDI. And so, before we get over there, with a box like this, you can also, use a traditional expression pedal. And then if you take a look at the face of this real quick, and when I hit this, you notice it jumps basically into this kind of, and you can hear it, jumps into stop mode, and then you can assign an additional function to this. So that is to say, we're dramatically increasing the functionality of this guy without MIDI, just using basically some TRS connections, both for the expression pedal. By the way, you need to know this, in case you didn't. If you're going to hook up an expression pedal, you need a tip, ring, sleeve connection. But you probably knew that anyway. All right, so the deal is, what we're going to talk about right now is just a little bit of MIDI magic. Because, fuzz or distortion. Hang on. Yeah, all right, so, sorry. Dan, this guy right here is a beautiful vintage fuzz face on loan from my buddy Mason at Vertex Effects. And this is a lovely little specimen, and I've been having all sorts of fun attempting to become Eric Johnson for a video session I'm doing tomorrow. Definite fuzz. And so, and if you're asking, hey Matthew, what's going on? Is that, hold on, wait, hold on just one second. Let me get to where I can see that a little bit better. Okay, hang on a second. There we go. Hello, come on. There we go. Come on. Why is that not coming up? Matthew, is that me die red medley? What is this? MIDI you speak of? Oh, got it. Oh, what is this? Humor, got it. What is this MIDI you speak of? All right, so here's the deal. All right, yes, you can control this guy like this, but that is a limited amount of functionality. So I'm, without going like totally bonkers on MIDI, and what's going on, Steve, in Modesto? Thanks so much for hanging out. All right. There's only so much you can do even with this. So the magic of this, and I have to admit, I totally stole this off of a guy whose name I can't remember on YouTube, who basically was using this device just like this. So if you search Morningstar MC6, I think he was actually using the MC8, but he had a strategy for using this. So I'm going to show you what that strategy is. Basically, this guy, I can use via MIDI to control this box. I can use it via MIDI to control this box. And if I had the loop station on here, which I don't, I can actually get that to stop and start. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the strategy of using a controller like this. Now, I am basically on the first bank here. And so you can see it says GT1000, H9, RC5, empty, empty. So if I just step on the foot switch or press the foot switch, it takes me up to the bank for the GT. Now watch what happens over here when I press this guy here. Switches to preset 1, number 2, number 3, 4, and 5. This one I reserve to hit home, which takes me back to that first bank. Now, if I hit this switch, and again, a minute ago I just hit this guy that took me up to what is my second bank, where I'm using that just to control the GT1000 core. Now, I've got a couple of these presets set up. If I go to preset 1 through 3, as I recall, watch what happens over here. When this is on 1, that guy will chase it, so that they're both on 1, they're both on 2, they're both on 3, and I think I stopped that. Yeah, there you go. So once it gets to 4 and 5, this one's no longer chasing there. So I can also program this guy to tell this one to say, hey, when I go to preset 1, go to preset 1. Go to preset 2, you go to preset 2. All right, so on and so forth. Now, separate from that, if I jump to my H9 bank over here, and you can just think of it as layers. And so the first layer is kind of this home one. The second one is this guy right here, where it's basically saying, hey, GT1000 core, you do this. and then you have a home button to get back, and then that's so this right here is the first layer, second layer is GT1000, third layer is H9. And so now when I make a change here, it only affects the H9. So what's so cool about that is that it allows you to basically have random access to control anything on your board with one push of a button. Now, if you're already using some multi-effects unit like, a larger Helix or, the GT1000 Pro, whatever it is, a lot of those, that functionality you wouldn't necessarily need because you could use the brain in most of those units to control some external MIDI device. So, that's great. But the great thing about MIDI is it's so incredibly powerful. As you just saw, it's just like, wow, it's relatively easy to use. So the last thing I'm going to say about MIDI before we finish this little piece of the conversation up is this. Is that generally speaking, as you're inside your signal chain here, you want to think about the flow of MIDI information. And as you set up each of these devices, you assign it the equivalent of a phone number, which is a MIDI channel. So this guy I've got set up at MIDI channel 1. This one, you guessed right, MIDI channel 2. This one is MIDI channel 3. That enables me to send unique program changes. Again, that says H9 right there. I'm selecting the bank for the H9. So there's H9 number 3. When I hit that, it goes, well, it was already at number 3. H9 number 4. So that allows me to have this device talk to that device only. And that's a very powerful way to be able to take relatively small gear, but still incredibly sophisticated and have a lot of control over it without losing your mind in the middle of a service, stepping on 5 different things. Okay, so first of all, there we go. I got, all right, I've got some comments here. Is that me die, meaty? Is that MIDI? Me die, meaty, MIDI that I speak. Thank you, Matthew. Got it. Sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake today. Deanne, I got a Tube Screamer now. Need a fuzz pedal for Christmas birthday. Awesome. My MIDI dyslexia is so old style pedals for me. So, here's the thing. There is absolutely nothing wrong, no shame, with just using good, old, great, classic pedals that don't have MIDI. Nothing wrong with that at all. Actually, some of the greatest pedals of all time, like this little morsel right there, MIDI didn't even exist yet. And so, we don't necessarily want to go further down the gear rabbit trail than we need to. All right, so with that said, I would love to take some more gear questions, if there are some. And if not, I'm just going to kind of keep talking about a couple of things here that are going to be relevant. Because, there we go. Okay, there we go. Hello, Forrest. Comments on limitations with built-in multi-effects delay function. By the way, a humble Pod Go user here. Okay, so do me a favor, Forrest. Illuminate what specifically you're wanting to do. And I have Pod Go here, and I have to sheepishly admit that I have spent about this much time on Pod Go, and I need to have an extended jam weekend with Pod Go because it's a groovy little box. So the thing is that to answer your implicit question that you didn't know was an implicit question, there is generally one delay vibe that I go for. Not that I profess that the whole world goes for it, but it's basically a dual delay. One side is a dotted eighth, the other is a quarter. And what's neat about that, if you're going out in stereo, is it allows you to get some stereo separation left and right, if only in the delay side. And it's not so completely, it's, if you will, kind of the Van Halen sound where, it's got all these effects over on one side and the other side's dry, right? It's kind of like, if you're on the wrong side of the room for a Van Halen mix, it's not necessarily going to be, it's not going to sound great because it's intended to kind of be heard kind of center channel. So that is one of the things. So you know what? Okay, so do me a favor, Forrest. Um, I am. There are two Doug Doppler Facebook pages. One is it's kind of like my personal one, and then one is my official one. Uh, if you get a moment, send me a detailed message specifically asking about what it is that you're kind of with the delays and because it seems like you're asking a sophisticated question. And I would love to know what it is that you're wanting to do that it's not letting you do, or what it is that you're just plain wanting to do that you're not necessarily 100% positive. Doesn't sound like that's going to be the case, but just kind of let me know. Hit me. All right, Brett. I find it very difficult to find an easy understand tutorials on the basics of MIDI and how to program it. Okay. So that is a mission that my buddy Andrew Bonica and I are going to be working on, and I don't necessarily know whether that will end up being a quote unquote pay MIDI course, but I think it's highly probable, given the season that I'm in right now, especially on the worship side of things, that there'll be some sort of worship MIDI tutorial for worship guitar players. And so the very simple overview of that is this. For every different device you've got on your pedal board, you want to assign it a different MIDI number. It's kind of like for everybody that's on your block, everybody should really have a different phone number. That way, when you want to call this neighbor and have a conversation with them, that's great. If you want to do a group call, you can do that too, saying, hey, everybody, we're doing this. And the ability to basically assign a MIDI number to each one of these devices enables you to go from whatever, if you will, the MIDI master is, to all the other dependent devices, and you can either speak to all the other devices at the same time or just one. There are two main types of MIDI information that you're going to send from this master device. PCs, program changes, which is just basically saying, hey, H9, switch to patch 22. All right, great. H9, switch patch 42. And that's one of the neat things about MIDI is you can send very specific information, just going, when this happens, I want you to go to this patch. There is also another type of message called a CC, control change. My bad. And a control change is basically, let's imagine we're talking about Forrest's delay pedal, and or delay inside Pod Go, and I'm 90% positive that you can. Pod Go has MIDI. It's upstairs, but I'm 90% positive it does. So let's just imagine. Actually, let's make that easier. Let's talk about. Let me see myself here, so I make sure I'm HX effects. All right, right here, boom, you got MIDI in and out. Okay, so let's say I wanted to target a delay, and as I move from one patch on my GT1000 core to another one, and I want to use the delay that's in HX effects, I really like this one particular delay. I've fallen in love with it. All I want to do is when I go to my solo patch, I want the delay level to go up. I don't need to change patches on that. All I need is when I go to my lead patch over here, the delay level goes up. And that's what you use the CC for. You're going, hey, you're going to basically send a MIDI message on the appropriate channel. Again, you assign a channel just like you do a phone number for each of your neighbors. And you basically send a message. Basically it's like a text message saying, hey, more delay over there. That's a MIDI CC. And so it makes it so you can kind of have all these things happen at the same time. It's really not much more complicated than that, with one single exception that I will read you all in on. Looking at this little board over here, you can see that this guy right here is connected to this little, this is a USB mini cable. And then this one over here would have had just a traditional USB Type 2, USB 2 Type C, I think is what it is, or whatever. It just says regular USB 2. Sorry, I'll get that together. And this one would have, I think you can see it over here. This is going to be a USB 2 mini. Oh, yeah, this one's the mini. This one's the micro. All right, so the point being is that and yes. Oh, come on. Get over to the right window, Doppler. Okay. There we go. So when you have these devices connected up to their deep editors, quite often the MIDI messages don't work properly. So that can be a very frustrating experience. You've programmed everything right, should be working, and all of a sudden you're pushing the buttons and nothing's happening. If you find that's the case, just disconnect the editor, and you will probably find that things work a lot better. It's a funny thing, but it's just one of those things. What I commonly refer to as MIDI purgatory, and I've spent a bunch of times there. And yes, HX Effects is a great box. So let's see here. I've got a Klon question down there. I can see that little puppy. That would be my buddy Chris. I already know who's asking that. Yeah, what about the Klon? I have not nabbed a Klon. All right, hang on. There we go. Okay. I'm using the Jet Micro with the HX Stomp. MIDI is magic. I love it. Jet Micro. Brad, hang on a second. I don't know about a Jet Micro. Hang on a second. Jet Micro. But I will now. Jet pedals. Oh. Well. Huh. Okay. You have my attention. Awesome. And they're worship guys. That's even better. See, I love doing stuff like this because I'm always learning. That is great. Okay, let me get over to the right window here. And let me get you closed. There we go. All right, excellent. Yeah, the Klon thing's kind of on hold for a minute, but the mission is not over. Is there a best speaker for HX Stomp or the Boss Core? That's a great question, Chris. I personally am a fan of the Tech 21 Deuce Deluxe. I love Power Engine. I love. Line 6. Power Cap. But I think I like the Tech 21 Deuce Deluxe a little bit better for one primary reason. When you're making a FR device, you have to kind of be a lot of things to a lot of people. And the thing that I really, really love about what they've done with the Deuce Deluxe is, and I noticed this the moment I plugged in, I'm like, this sounds and feels like a 412 cabinet. Now, if you're not wanting it to sound and feel like a 412 cabinet, that I think that signature is kind of part of the imprint of that because it's got an extra deep cabinet, and so it responds in a way that just feels much more like a traditional 412 cabinet, even though it's a single 12-inch speaker with a defeatable tweeter. But because of that reason, it's the one thing that I have found with FR devices that when I really want it to sound and feel like a 412 cabinet, I'm always just kind of going, okay. Now for church, the power cap is great. The tilt back function, I love it. I have a pair of them. That's my go-to church rig. I lean them back so the sound person doesn't freak out. They're facing back at me. It's like my own personal monitor system. I'm at a small church. We don't use IEMs in this season. So IEMs rather. So the ability to just be able to have wall of Doug without it being exceedingly loud is a lovely thing. And I'm a big stereo fanatic, so that works really well for that. So it depends on what the use is, but I've seen your guitar wall. You're a bit of a shredder. So my guess is it's going to be the Tech 21 Deuce Deluxe for you. Okay, Matthew, hey. Okay, I love my HX Effects, snapshots, do that. And snapshots are awesome. And snapshots and an expression pedal, HX Effects is my whole board. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, is just like, you know, this is the thing is one of the things that's, I think, starting to happen is that I think guitar players are a little less enamored with like, let me have a board that like I have to like I have to warm up before I actually move this thing to and from church. It's just kind of like the smaller board. I think is becoming a lot more popular simply because somebody in my other streaming show last week, was talking about the smallest number of points of potential breakage, and it's a really smart concept. And they're kind of some brainiac, studying neuroplasticity and I don't know, whatever. It had some bazillion-dollar school. Not that it's about the money, but the point being is that they were, and it's a very logical question. It's like, look, the more points of failure you potentially have on your board, the more you're going to risk potentially going down, unless you have some sort of switcher in there. And I'm a big fan of those types of devices. The RJM stuff is particularly great, and I love that. But kind of this smaller board thing, I think it's really coming, and that's where something like HSFX is so effective. Yes, 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 yes. All right, so Forrest, let me see if I can dig in here. Go with simple plug and go unit, which is kind of cool. Typically, going for the standard delay, dotted 8 sounds. Da, da, da. All right, Brett's replying. They're great. Thank you. Even if you had to pay for the. Oh, there we go. That Brett's talking to me. I'm jumping between convos in the thread here. Even if you had to pay for the course to be worth it, just to understand the language of MIDI. Brett, the great news is it's not complicated. And most importantly, once you get MIDI up and running, it's like the ninja move on your pedal board. It is awesome. All right, Forrest, always exploring new sounds, so need to think about expanding that a bit. Will enhance the question. Yeah, do me a favor. Go in, if you will, Forrest, and maybe we'll both agree, and then we'll see who's going to get it done faster. My guess is that there are a bunch of delays inside Podgo. And so my suggestion would be to just sit there and work with a bunch of them. I would be really surprised if there's not a dual delay. And again, the dotted eighth on one side and the quarter note on the other. I just love that because you get all your dotted eighth stuff, as you pointed out, but you also get your quarter notes, which the two of them, when you're sitting in the middle of that, it's just like sonic excellence. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, I have caught up here, so that means I get a chance. This is what's neat is the latest and the greatest. So let's back up a couple of steps and kind of talk about what some of the what's new and what's not. First of all, the new black hole reverb pedal from Eventide that just showed up. I have not had a chance to plug it in. High on my list because look at that. It's such a cute little pedal. Very cute. This LR Bags voice print. This is a big deal. The short version of what that pedal does is there's an app. You use the app, and I watched a video on it, so if I get this wrong, my apologies. But basically, you plug in your piezo into this thing, and then there's an app that also reads the sounds in the room. So you do a couple of different gestures, including tapping on the body to kind of let the app register the resonance. And then what it does is it creates an IR of the sound of your acoustic guitar, not with the piezo that's underneath the bridge, but with a mic on it. And it's still using the natural sound of your instrument as the impetus. So it's not like you're just totally wiping away the character of your guitar. It's actually to the contrary of that. It's taking the essence of your guitar and making it so it comes out when you're playing. And the sounds are really, really good. I've been super impressed, so I can't wait to dig in on that. Very, very cool. All right, let's see. Brad, let's take a look. I'm pretty sure all are the same effects in the HX and the Go, minus a couple of high DSP ones. I think you're right. I think, this is the thing, is that with the exception of some of the oxygen suckers, I think it's got a lot of the same effects. All right, Deanne, I've seen a lot of people using Pog's pedal, and I'm not sure if I should sell my Dipty. All right, so so the interesting thing about the Pog is it's a little bit on its way out. It was extra hyper popular, and here's the thing: I love the Pog for probably one main reason, and that is this. Say you've got some guitar melody, it's a signature thing, and it's at this perfect spot, like let's just say the 12th fret, right? It's in a quote unquote, dare I say, guy key. All of a sudden, it gets transposed for a female worship leader, and you're now, instead of being at the 12th fret, you're up at the 17th fret. And you're playing this melody line that sounded really good further down, and as you move it up the neck, it starts to lose the bottom end, because the higher up the neck you go, not only do the notes get higher, but they're just a little bit smaller. So using an octave down in a situation like that is perfect, even if it's just a little bit, because what it does, it just makes the notes that next little bit bigger. And I love that. I remember where I started doing that was, and I'm going to date myself, but you're from Australia, so my guess is Salvation is here. So I remember we would do that. We'd have male worship leaders lead it, and then the female worship leaders, we would have it way up the neck, and the guitar line, I was just like, I'm just hating this. So I was like, okay, I got to do something. And inside the at that point, I would have been using the Pod HD500. Not even the 500X, but the point being is that had an octaver in it, and that's what I would use, which is the equivalent of Pog. So that's a great question. Digitech Whammy. Oh, got it. Right. Gosh darn it. I should know every pedal in the world, but of course I don't. Hold on. So let's check out. There we go. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Digitech. Just one second. Digitech. Digitech. There we go. Okay. Got it. All right. Got it. I have not used all the little Digitech things. I have a whammy over there, and the thing is that it had, as I recall, a proprietary power supply, which of course now all the newfangled board power supplies can power just about anything. But that was one of the reasons I kind of stopped using it. But that was in my rig a bunch for a while. So the idea of something that's not totally wacky to manage in terms of the power is a good thing. Okay, I've seen a lot of people do Digitech Whammy. Yes, Digitech Whammy is awesome. The other thing that I want to check out is their feedbacker thing, which I'm going to forget the name of, but I think that is really cool. Gotta love that. All right, Brett. I find MIDI complicated simply because I don't understand how to connect the numbers between devices. Like CC or PC, I tried to use GT100 as a controller for my Katana amp. That was a disaster. There is going to be a... I think, first of all, one of the neat things about the live stream type of thing, unlike... And it's one of the interesting things that I love about this type of format. I'm not going to go MIDI bonkers any further than I did before. And Brett, if you missed the section where I was kind of talking about MIDI, just scoot back on the replay. But the thing is that unlike just putting up a traditional video, and I'm usually pretty good about going back and answering questions, what's neat about doing something like that in a live setting where we're like, hey, we're going to do a MIDI breakdown, the idea is it allows us to kind of have a syllabus. We can take little breaks. Anybody got any questions? And everybody can come along. And if you need to, you can separate them into kind of, if you will, levels, like MIDI for first-time users, MIDI for people that maybe, MIDI for those who forgot how to use it, so on and so forth. But it's again, the simple version is every device gets its own MIDI number, and the easiest way to make it work is if you want your GT100 on patch 1 to basically tell the katana to go to the first MIDI number on the katana, you just basically get them working one-to-one. Or if, for example, your katana is able to send MIDI information. Let's imagine it's a 3-channel amp, and I'm just guessing here. But your katana's got a clean, a crunch, and a lead. So when you go for your clean, that is potentially going to be MIDI. It's going to be on whatever MIDI channel the katana is on, but it's going to be program change 1, then program change 2, or basically patch 001, patch 002, patch 003. Then having whatever effects device you use that's connected to that, just map them up such that when you're on program 1 on the katana, you're on program 1 of your GT100. When you're on program 2 of your katana, that is to say the crunch channel, you're on program 2 of your GT100. That means that the sort of things that you would want to do to control the crunch channel, that's what you've got on that program 2 on the GT100. Program 3, that's your lead tone. Program 3 is whatever you're going to do, nice long delays and reverb. So that way, with that kind of one-to-one thing, instead of this kind of like the kind of wacky stuff I was doing there, where I'm randomly choosing something that's not necessarily in the order of the presets, but it's really easy to, as long as you kind of think about the 3 potential programs associated with your clean, crunch, and lead, that if the katana is able to send MIDI information, which it may just receive it, but let's just imagine it does. And there are 3 options there. Maybe another one that turns, delays on and off, whatever, or reverbs on and off. But to basically just kind of make it such that, things are matched up 1-to-1, 2-to-2, 3-to-3. In fact, let me show you exactly what that looks like over here. So, for example, let me get over to the right window. That is not the right window. This is the right window right here. Watch what happens when I go over to this bank right here for the GT1000. Preset number 1, 2, and 3. When I hit that, oh, you're not going to do that for me. All right. So when I go to preset 1, this guy's on preset 1. I'm going to select preset 2. These 2 are both going to go to preset 2, preset 3. So what's nice about that is you're not going to lose your mind looking down at your pedal board. Now, when I go to preset 4 over here, notice that the H9 isn't changing. Okay, and I did that on purpose, not to confuse you, but I did that because I wanted to demonstrate the ability to kind of make the GT1000 core be able to tell the H9, just go, hey, just follow me. That's a pretty easy function to do. But that's separate from then the random access approach, being able to go, okay, I'm going to hit the home button here. I'm going to go to the bank that says H9. Now, rather than having this guy saying to this guy, hey, just follow me when I go to preset 1, you're going to go to 1, 2, 3. Now watch what happens on the H9 here. I can randomly access anything up here, and this doesn't change that, all right? That ability is really kind of what makes it so great. You can choose how granular you want to be with your control. It's incredibly powerful, and I love that. Okay. All right. So let's see here. So this whole concept of kind of what's new, what's not. The other thing that I've been doing over the past couple of days, in addition to working on yet another demo, is tomorrow I have a very interesting session. My buddy Mason from Vertex Effects has invited me to be part of a video he's doing, and basically my job is to kind of sound, quote unquote, like So Brad, I'm going to pause myself. Brad, one of the other things, I'm going to take the bait there. One of the other big things that is a big deal is not just whammy effects, but the fact that there's a polyphonic pitch shift such that you can basically use the Helix as a, if you will, virtual capo, most importantly, to go down in case your worship leader announces, hey, I don't want to do it in E today. Can we do it a half step lower? And you're in the beloved key of E flat, and you're like, yeah, no problem. Have you had a chance to use the polyphonic pitch shift on it? Because that's a big deal about 3.0. Curious to know that, Brad. All right, Brett, I understand how it functions and that you can control several devices to do that, totally to do different things. I just never learned how to make it all work. Thanks. Okay, Shane, hello, my friend, Gear Whisperer. Probably off topic and a question for another time, but who does streaming? Okay, what does streaming do to guitar tone coming from the amp, and what can I adjust to compensate? Okay. Um, Generally speaking, I've been really impressed with the fidelity of how guitar sounds when it streams. So if you're, dare I say, not happy with the end results, let's back up a couple of steps because that is a great question, and I'm gonna frame that in the kind of the latest and the greatest, what's new and what's not. Um, and then I'll come back and talk about attempting to become Eric Johnson because of the practice thing that's gone into that and just really what it looks like when I attempt to kind of get into a deep state of practice and try and make something happen. Because, regardless of who you are and what you do, at a certain point, you're going to find yourself needing to practice something that's a little bit further than your skill set is, and having to play up and practice up to do that. And it's an interesting phenomenon. Hey, what's going on, Alan? Great to see you. Cutting tracks and Reaper, love that. So here's the thing. Shane was asking about how when you're streaming. My guess is you're asking this, Shane, because you're like not super happy with the way my guitar sounds. There are a couple of things that we want to take into account in the midst of all this. So let's zoom way out. Does our guitar sound great front of house? Why does it sound great front of house? If you're running direct and it sounds great front of house, chances are it's going to sound great coming out over the interwebs. If you're using one or more amplifiers and microphones, you've now dramatically increased the variables that a volunteer sound tech and sound team has to deal with inside the venue, and in turn when you go inside the box to start streaming. So here's the important thing to keep in mind. Drums are a really great example of this. You've got Johnny or Joni snare drum that just loves to beat the daylights out of that snare drum. Love a good snare drum, so don't get me wrong. But you're going to find that unless your broadcast mixer, that is to say the person that's back there preparing the mix for broadcast, which quite often is happening not only at the same time as your service, regardless of how many people are or are not there, and soon it'll be much smaller, but they're having to make it sound great in the room, and they're also having to make it sound great online, which is kind of an impossible task. And so the louder something is in the room, acoustically, the higher the probability that sound tech is going to have that level down on the board, which means the greater the probability that that thing is going to be too quiet when it gets set up for the broadcast mix. So that is kind of the first dynamic is like, are you being mic'd? Because if you're being mic'd as opposed to running direct, that is probably a big part of where the downward spiral begins. For the sake of conversation, I keep toggling windows like a toggler. For the sake of conversation, one of the things about a device like this is I'm using basically the loops to go out to the pair of amplifiers that are behind me, and I could use basically the main output there if I wanted to, the direct out to go to basically the front of house. So it means that for church in particular, that sort of a setup is really good. It means you could have, again, you've heard me talk about this before, but you can kind of hide that amp to the right-hand side, because traditionally I stand on the right-hand side of the platform. You can hide that amp over there, and if you're a couple of steps back from where the worship leaders are, it's kind of pointing up at you. Your guitar gets a little bit of stage volume, but then you're not using that source to go into the PA. You're using the direct out of that. And in that instance, most of these devices at this point are getting sophisticated enough such that you can use your amp as an amp, and you can use an amp model inside the box there, so both sound cool. And so that kind of strategy, especially for the house of worship, is really valuable. Um, so that is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful concept of being able to kind of go, what's the strategy? And here's the thing: there's usually a point where it starts to go south. And so one of the things that you might do if you have a wireless and or they're pretty cheap these days, stand out front and hear what the guitar actually sounds like in the venue. Then in turn, what does it sound like? If you have your amps up, what does it sound like if you turn your amps way down and then compensate and bring the volume of the guitar up in the PA? That's going to tell you the difference between what the guitar sounds like in the room and what the guitar through the PA sounds like in the room. And the same is true even if you're not using an amp on stage. Being able to be out in front in the congregation, or where the congregation would be, and hearing what your gear sounds like front of house. There's no way the PA in your church sounds like whatever it is you're monitoring through at home. So kind of figuring that piece out is a big, 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 big deal, and finding the disparity, and then potentially working with your sound tech to try and get a better sound there. It's a great question. Okay. Okay. All right, let's take a look. Alan, welcome. All right, Brad, laugh out loud. Yes, I have. It works, but it sucks to hit me. So you have to watch what else is in the patch. The acoustic sim works pretty good too. That's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've heard is that it works really well, but it is a little DSP hungry. So the management, it's one of those things where if you're using 2 amps and 2 cabinet blocks, my guess is you're not going to be able to use 2 amps and 2 cabinet blocks with that. But it's still a great feature to have. All right, Alan, I was talking with a buddy about stuff we cut in the 80s at the studios at MTSU. I never got a guitar tones that I like, ever. Now it's so easy to direct. Okay, so there's a couple of things. Alan, did you like the sound of your guitar at the time? So Shane, this is funny. So we've got Shane's on Facebook. This is coming in on YouTube. Oh wait, let's see. I can bring in YouTube here. Hang on. Let's do this. Shane, you'll see this come into the broadcast. Okay, there we go. I rarely hear bad guitar tone stream these days. And yes, that would be really cool. So here's the thing: is that volunteer techs on volunteer sound teams aren't always great at all the things that they need to be great at. I've heard some bad mixes, but fortunately, you've not been similarly summoned, so that's a good thing. And it is what it is, and it is frustrating when your guitar doesn't sound good. So curious. So Brad, excuse me, Alan. Okay, there we go. My bad. Did you like your guitar tone when you were doing that recording? And was it just kind of the recording process that kind of didn't work out well? Because this again gets us back to Shane's comment: is that if you find yourself in a situation where, let's say, for example, you have a sound tech who just loves guitar, but they love grindcore guitar, and you're a worship guitar player. Grindcore, of course, is this very aggressive thing, and you've got this lovely, open, ethereal thing, and they desperately want to make your lovely, ethereal thing as much like grindcore as they can, even if it's just totally subconscious. They're mixing for the way they think the mix should sound, and you're hearing that end result. So this is where this dialogue comes in. And again, the latest and greatest. The old and new is another way of saying it. That dialogue we have with our sound techs and just kind of going, let's sit down and listen to this. because I heard, and the other thing is that, if you're on a team where there's a second guitar player and you can hear what it's like when they're streaming and you kind of go, okay, the guitars just kind of always sound not good. Then you can have a conversation with the other guitar player and not the, hey, let's gang up on the sound team, but kind of going, hey, what do you think? And then you can begin to investigate, some of the ways that you can remedy this situation in terms of being able to provide solutions for people to know what it is that you're looking for with a guitar. And that, one of the best things you can do is go, hey, well, you're not going to hand them a CD, but you can potentially bring your mobile device in and go, hey, I'd like you to hear this particular sound. That is really the vibe that I'm going for. Can we try and make the guitar sound more like that? And then they will potentially say, well, yes, but if you play a little bit quieter and use a little bit less drive and a little bit less delay, it's going to be more clear and you will be more audible. And then you're on this very positive dialogue, because then what you do is you try stuff and then you have the benefit. Now, this is one of the greatest things, Shane. The great news about all of this is we now have the benefit to actually hear what it sounds like. I mean, it is, and we may not necessarily always like the results, but it used to be you just up there and you're just kind of like, I don't think anybody can hear my guitar at all. And you have no way of knowing, right? And then, but now when you're kind of listening to the replay of the live stream, you're like, you either know that your guitar wasn't up at all, or you're like, oh, that's not what I was going for. So, then it's figuring out where is that ball being dropped in the midst of that. It's just a communication thing. If for example, you show up with a Les Paul, and in the sound tech's mind, that means that you want to sound like Slash, then they're going to maybe, try and make you sound more like Slash. It's a funny thing what the process of association does for people. Just saying. It's just one of those components. Why is this not... All right, fine. All right, let's take a look at this here. And there we go. Deanne, we use a Fender Deluxe 3, but I had to put a small power brick on it because I was told because I was too loud. Great amp. Those the Deluxes are great little amps, and so. But the neat thing about being able to is kind of pull them back a little bit is at least you're still able to get the benefit of a tube amp, and that's big. That's huge. Love that. Cool. Alan, at church I love what I hear in my ears and out front. Helps that our sound man is a guitar player. Absolutely. Always good to have a sound tech that is a guitar player. Okay, Luis. Hi. Hey, Doug. Random question for the Gear Guru. Uh-oh. You may be getting yourself into trouble there, but I appreciate the faith just the same. I kind of want to upgrade from my Fender Deluxe HSS. Okay. Any options on Strat-style guitars? Sir, Iconic, Fender, etc. I've been leaning towards Sir for a while, but would love your take. All right. Boy, that's a giant question. Okay. A couple of easy ways to answer that. First of all, I think the Sir guitars, first of all, they're really pretty, right? Like, let's face it. I'm sorry, I'm going to grab Pinky here. Like, when my wife saw me playing this, she was like, what about this guitar appeals to you? I'm like, what about it doesn't, right? So it's got kind of this green vintagey kind of look. It's, I think they call it shell pink. It's even got the little bridge cover, which is actually kind of a pain in the butt. But the point being is that I must admit, I was smitten with the way that guitar looked, right? So I think the Sirs are really lovely looking guitars. I think, for one, listening to Pete Thorne, who kind of has his own signature Sir guitar, and listening to his sound and see how you like it. Nigel is playing a Sir, and then Matteo Sasato. It's going to seem like a cheap answer, but it's not. Who are the players whose sound every time you hear him play, you're just like, man. And then you kind of go, okay, how much of that is the guitar, right? So again, you're asking kind of an implicit question there about the HSS. So I'm going to actually zero in on that piece as well. Getting a great HSS, and for those of you who don't know, if I didn't say it before, that's humbucker, single, single. That is to say, it's a humbucker in the bridge and then two single coils in the middle and neck position, respectively. Finding the right humbucker that is a good balanced level for when you switch back and forth between the different sounds, and then when you really want to step on the gas in the bridge position, that's kind of like, that's a bit of an oxymoron to be able to work that out. It's actually a really cool thing. I think the Sirs do a really good job of that. They can be a little present in that there is a frequency right around 2.5K, if I were to guess, that's just a little tiny forward in those guitars. Now, here's the thing. It's one of the things that people who play those guitars probably really, really love about them, because it means that it's sitting forward in the mix, which is always a great thing. If you will, it's a very similar thing to, hey, Rick, what's going on? It's a very similar thing to one of the reasons why people love Taylors. Now, the Sirs are not as forward as the Taylors are, but the reason worship leaders love Taylors is, first of all, if you're leading to your acoustic guitar and you can't hear that instrument, you're going to have a hard time finding your notes. So, for one reason above all others, being able to hear yourself because the guitar cuts through is really important. But number two, you also know it's going to cut through in the congregation as well, which is one of the reasons why Taylors are so incredibly popular with worship leaders. Is, as a general rule, I would say, and I'm going to step out on a limb here, that I would say that worship leaders favor Taylors a little bit more than worship acoustic guitar players. Quite often they're one and the same, but generally speaking, I think one of the reasons they're so appealing is the worship leader just really needs to be able to hear themselves. And if you think about the way an acoustic guitar projects, it's kind of like, if you will, the sound hole is the equivalent of the speaker. So you're kind of above all this production, if you will, that's spitting out this way, unless you're listening in ears, which, a bunch of us are, a bunch of us aren't. I'm in a small church. That ability to hear the attack of the instrument as it's coming out of the instrument, because it's a little bit more forward, is a good thing. The other thing about this is the neck shape. And this is one of the things that really amazes me, is how different the neck shapes are. So first and foremost, Luis, I would suggest when it's convenient, making your way to a Sir dealership, somebody that's selling Sirs, obviously, that's close enough to you that you can get there, and play a bunch of the necks and see if the necks appeal to you. There was one of 5 or 10 guitars that I let go, and I have this thing about guitars, like, when I actually find a guitar, I'm like, and I've let it go, I just kind of regret them forever. And there was a kind of a misty green color, like that pink of a Sir Strat, and I think it was one of the first ones with a baked maple neck. And I played that guitar, but I was just like, I just can't see spending $2,500 on a guitar. I've since softened on that posture, but kind of somebody in here said, there you go, Matthew said, tone is in the hands, and the idea being, how do I say this without sounding? Actually, this is a good way to say it. If you can't make a $1,000 guitar sound great, chances are a $2,000 guitar ain't going to do the difference. Now, let me back up from that a little bit and say this, is that, that little shell pink Strat there is just under a $2,000 guitar, and that is one of the best guitars that I've ever played. And so for all the things that it does, I love it. Now, Luis, here's where it gets complicated. And my guess is that you have a pretty clear idea of what you're wanting to do, but every single Strat I've got is totally different. No two of them are the same. They don't play the same. They don't sound the same. They don't feel the same. I do not have identical models of Strats. Now, I will back up from that and say one thing. I ended up somehow accidentally getting two Jazz Masters that were identical Jazz Masters. They sound shockingly identical. So I've seen it happen in the Fender line, but of the different Strats that I've got here, they are all slightly different variations, different models and whatnot, and they all sound really different. So then it's a matter of going, what Strat are you looking for? Are you looking for a really vintage vibe? Are you looking for something, like the Lincoln Brewster that's kind of got a great solo tone, got a little bit of honk when you need it. It's like it's gonna make way because it's got that boost circuit in it. And Lincoln's thing is that if he doesn't want to have to, he can basically use the boost function that's in that circuit there, not the same one as the Clapton one, but to really drive the front end of whatever amp he's plugged into. It's a genius guitar. So because of that, there is so much variation. So backing up again to who are the players that when you hear them play inspire you, and you can kind of go, even if it's not in worship, I could hear this coming in there. The Mateus Asado approach where it's got a little bit of spank going on the top end, but it's not totally in your face. He has a signature guitar, shell pink, no less. So again, really identifying which instruments sonically you're like, it's just one of those things when I hear certain sounds, I'm like, that sounds great. What is it that just, forgetting what it looks like, who's playing, when you hear it, you're just like, that's a great sounding guitar. Chances are you'll start to gravitate to the same thing over and over. And when you really find what that is a great way to fuel a purchase. And the Lincoln Strat is great, by the way. So hope that was a help. That was a bunch of information. And it wasn't just rambling. It's just like there's a huge amount of nuance to a guitar. Like every single one of these Strats, you kind of think about, all right, there's a fourth position and a second position. Those, in many ways, are the places I have a tendency to live the most. The other thing is the neck position. Obviously, that's a great place. The funny thing is that down in the bridge, so long as it's got what I call, and this is the Eric Johnson signature Strat, it's got the Eric Johnson tone control mod, is what I call that, where the tone control, which normally doesn't work in the bridge position, ironically, the pickup that's kind of most bright, Eric basically was the first person I heard of this said, hey, you know what? I want a tone control on that bridge pickup. And it really allows you to tame not only that sound, but the number 2 position. And so the nuances of what happens in that number 2 and number 4 position are a very, very big deal. And they're different on the different guitars depending on what the pickups are. Is it a maple neck? That is a maple fingerboard with a maple neck. Now, I should rephrase, because somebody asked this a couple of weeks ago. There was a period of time that Fender was making a maple neck and laminating / gluing a maple fingerboard or a rosewood fingerboard on top of it. That's how they have to do it with a rosewood fingerboard, obviously. But doing that with a maple neck and adding a different piece of maple at the top is not cool. So when I say basically maple, it is, pointing out that it is a maple neck, but it's a maple board, right? So the thing about the maple board that is a big deal, and there was a period when you go in to play in certain situations where you just like that same thing that I was talking about with the Taylor, when you need a little bit of something to poke through the mix a little bit, that's where the maple is really good. It's just a little bit more present. The rosewood, on the other hand, is just a little bit more earthy. And so, interestingly enough, both these guitars have kind of a vintagey vibe, but the rosewood board makes the pink guitar much, much, much darker. A lot of information there, I realize. Okay. Yes, love Lincoln too. Absolutely. All right, Brett, I'm having trouble finding info on rev amps like the ones behind you. What is savable in MIDI presets? Can you clarify if the EQ settings are saved or just the cab settings and things like that? I can answer that question very easily. The only thing that is saved is which is the information, and it happens at two different layers. You have a virtual cabinet rotary dial with 6 positions. Basically, those happen in pairs. The first of each one, that is to say the odd numbers, are paired with the next up even number. The even number has a little bit of digital verb on it. The next odd number doesn't. The next even number does. So it's basically going same cab with without verb with verb. The next cab without verb with verb. Next cab without verb with verb. So it's basically 2 instances of each cab, the second of which has reverb. Not only that, inside the two notes torpedo remote software, you are able to also apply a virtual power amp to that, as well as obviously reverb, because we just talked about that. And you can save it to those 6 positions, or you can save it in up to, I believe, 128 is the magic number, presets, including those first 6. So those are recallable by MIDI, unlike the ones that, sorry, let me rephrase. To get to the presets in 7 and above, you're going to either need to stay connected to the deep editor or use some sort of MIDI controller to get to them. The ones that are on the face of the amp, obviously there's a little rotary dial, and you can swap those out. What I actually have gotten in the habit of doing is using the 2 amps, I'm using one setup with a 412 and the other setup with the 112 open back, and I kind of like the way the two respond together. They're both rev cabinets, and I like the fact that when you want to dig in, even though the 112 open back sounds really, really good, when you want to dig in, there's just a little bit more push you get out of the 412. It's a great question. Okay. Luis, with pleasure. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate your insight, and you've given me some things to consider. God bless. With pleasure. I hope I didn't confuse the matter, but here's the thing. It's like it's a big investment, but most importantly, that's if you will, I'm going to say the silly thing. It's your sword of worship. That's that you're going to go out and do spiritual warfare with that thing. It's a big deal. Finding the instrument that you're like, I love this. I love everything about it, and it's really neat. By the way, I would have to say that there are no guitars that I think everything about them is 100% perfect. There are little things. A minute ago, I mentioned that on the little pink Strat, I actually really love the bridge cover. It's kind of really old school to have it on there, but when I take it off, because it's vintage style saddles, they actually kind of poke into your hand, which is why I just kind of like, I'll put that back on there. There are little things about every guitar that you're kind of like, there's always going to be some little baby thing, but the idea is the more that you and there are certain guitars that are, because they're not trying to be the Swiss Army knife of everything, they do what they do really well. Like the Les Paul there, actually, which you can't really see in the rack, but it's there. It's basically a 1, 2, 3 trick pony, and all 3 of those things it does exceedingly well. But there's also some additional nuance on this, and it's a very important thing that gets overlooked a lot. Is placing the right strings on your guitar is an incredibly important thing. So because that's kind of an older instrument, I put kind of vintage style strings on it, and that really enables the character of the instrument to be paired properly with a string that, first of all, sonically it's the right sounding string, but also the different materials of strings are going to conduct differently when placed in an electromagnetic field that is basically what occurs between the strings and your pickup. So that interaction is really important. Great question. Oh, Jam, what's going on, my man? Luis, thanks again. Let me know how it goes. HX Stomp versus GT1000 core. Boy, he's going to go there. That's actually a pretty easy one to answer, Jim. And I will say that's going to be between the two, and I actually have to be on the right. There we go. Between the two of them. I am loving this little box. And the thing about this guy is it basically enables you to have 24 simultaneous effects happening at any time. So one of the conversation that's happening in the background gem that you may not have seen, but I'm sure you know about. And I'm really excited. I'm going to be firing up 3.0 because I'm going to be doing a video about that, and which means I got to kind of finish up with all the things that I'm working on and jump into that. The big conversation is about this kind of polyphonic pitch shifting and kind of how you have to kind of manipulate the DSP to be able to do all the things that you might want to do. The thing about the GT1000 Core compared to HX Stomp is that HX Stomp has a single processor, so it's just basically it is not so comparing apples and apples. If you compare the GT1000 Core with the GT1000 Pro, everything that's in the 1000 Pro is in the 1000 Core. It is just as powerful, which is mind-boggling. So they were kind of lucky in that they waited a little bit. They developed their own chips because they're boss, and so they were able to have all the power that you get in the GT1000, which is an incredibly powerful processor. The other thing is that that since HX Stomp has been around for a minute, it's been around for a minute. Now, that said, I've kind of, for the most part, live Helix, right? So because of that, all my go-to sounds have lived in Helix. So because of that, the form factor of HX Stomp is highly appealing as well. The interesting thing is that I think it's just a matter of timing, and sometimes it's just a matter of busyness, that when HX Stomp came out, I didn't immerse myself like I did with the GT1000 Core, simply because I knew this was an exciting opportunity for Boss, and honestly, as a demo guy, it was an exciting opportunity for me to get to know some new people. So every demo, you have the opportunity to meet the fans of that piece of gear and serve them and serve that community. And if you do that well, there are opportunities for those people to kind of follow some of the other things that you do because you've served their needs. And most of us don't just have one lone box. And so when you find somebody who's helpful to the process of getting this thing to function intelligently in a pedal board, so let's just imagine you are a first-time multi-effects user. So you've never dealt with MIDI, but not only have you not dealt with MIDI, this is an 1/8" TRS to 5-pin MIDI controller. If you don't know anything about that, you're going to wander down to Guitar Center or wherever it is and get the wrong MIDI cable or over to Amazon and not know this is MIDI type A versus MIDI type B, and you're going to have all this drama going on. So and so the idea is when you make the jump from single stomps, and Deanne was talking about that, and I was really clear. There is no shame in good old-fashioned, old-school stomps because you just plug them in and they work. But I also love the ability to step on a button and have a bunch of things change at the same time. And I would have to say the 1000 Core is an incredibly smart device. There are a couple little things that I think are firmware updates they're going to fix. I caught a couple of things, because when I dive into these, and it's not like, I'm special, but when I dive into these things, I dive in pretty hard. And usually if there's something that didn't get caught, that should have been caught, I'm going to the guy that finds it. And that's happened. A very, very high-end acoustic guitar manufacturer sent a guitar for review, and I'm like, the nut's cut wrong. And I had the email exchange with them, and I was like, the nut's cut wrong. And it was a very nice exchange. I was like, hey, the nut's cut wrong. And they're like, no. And I said, please go measure it. And they measured it, and they came back like, the nut's cut wrong. And this is a guitar that kind of went out through all the QA and just came out for review. And I'm like, I picked it up, and it was just buzzing just a little bit. I'm like, this nut's cut wrong. This company is too good for what that is. That's a mistake that got out the door. And it just happens with companies, even high-end companies. So, there are just a couple little baby things that I'm not going to go into that they'll fix in firmware updates. But it's a great question. Oh, and hang on a second. Let's get over here. My mouse is having a very strange time this evening. All right. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. Okay. There we go. That's funny. What is my go-to acoustic? So the funny thing is, I think I was rambling on about this last week. Well, I have this this little Ibanez that really shouldn't be a great acoustic guitar. But I love that little guitar, and I guess I must have done it in my mainstream show last week, where I pulled it up, and Jem will know the track that I played. And let me see. Oh, you know what? It may actually be in here. Hang on a second. Let me dare humor us. Give me a second here. Let me see if I can find this. Doug MP4. That sounds dangerous. I don't know. Let's see if this is it. Let's see how we do. I unmuted myself. There we go. I'm back. I have to do something in the background here. I've got a document I've got to sign real quick. But so let me just do that. Can I get to that in 2 minutes, Mel? Yeah. Okay. So, hi. We got a little something happening in the background. Good something. So the amazing thing about that little guitar is it acoustically is the smallest sounding instrument I've probably ever owned. But the pickups that are in there are Fishman. They're not like $1 million set of pickups, but that little guitar, first of all, I learned to play acoustic guitar on that guitar. So that guitar has I get very emotional when I think of that guitar because I discovered a whole other side of my guitar playing on that instrument. It's not a big sounding guitar, as I said, acoustically, but you plug it in and it's just all of a sudden it comes to life. Every time I pick that guitar up, people kind of like, that sounds great. Something about it just sounds really good, which ultimately is, kind of the whole thing. So that is my go-to acoustic. There is also a Martin SC13E, which is their fancy pants cutaway with their kind of cool new neck style that is here. That's also a really fine instrument. My wife also bought me a parlor guitar, and that's kind of one of the reasons I would like that little Ibanez there. I personally prefer the sound of a parlor guitar, it's just a particular sound that's a little bit more, ironically, it's a little bit more forward, but it's actually a little bit more forward because there's just not a huge amount of low end going on there. It's just a very pretty sound that kind of sits in this little spot, and just not much else is kind of in the way there. When you have a big sounding acoustic guitar, it's pushing a lot of air in a lot of different areas. That instrument is small but really pretty, and that has just enabled me to get a bunch of sounds that made me very, 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 very happy. All right, so let's see. I'm going to pull up another video here while I just do something that I've got to just very quickly need to attend to something. So, I know what we're going to do. All right. So, sorry, this is going to be kind of fun. So this is the Helix. Our SKB case is really waterproof. So if you have something like a Helix, or some sort of device pedal board that you want to keep dry, watch this. This is Doug coming to you from the San Francisco Bay on Fleet Week, and over here we've got my Helix, the brand new Helix Road case from SKB that's supposed to be waterproof, and we're about to take a swim in the San Francisco Bay. Okay, so we've got our DiMarzio cable, our power cable, and of course the Helix and the Helix harness, just so this thing doesn't disappear. We're going to lock this bad boy up. 1 latch, 2 latch, 3 latch, 4, 5, and 6. And we're on our way down to the San Francisco Bay. Let's do this. Okay. By the way, there are the Blue Angels right there. Pretty cool. And here is the Helix Roadshow. In the water we go. And boom, splash. Come on, baby. There we go. We got a hold of the Helix harness. Come on. All right, now what we're going to do is going to do a little bit of submersion test here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't think you'll normally be doing this out on the road, and by the way, I wouldn't suggest doing this at home, but, well, let's see if it's actually waterproof. Coming back up to shore, making sure that we don't come out of frame here, and hopefully I'm not going to trip on any of these rocks. And all right, here we go. So, the moment of truth has arrived. I'm going to give this bad boy a little bit of a towel down. And here we go. Watch number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. And boom, dry as we would like to see. So now we're going to plug it in and make sure that it works. So my Helix obviously survived its little swim in the bay, thanks to this SK. I'm back. Holy cow. I don't know quite what possessed me to do that, but it was certainly a lot of fun. So in any case, thanks for that little moment of intermission. I had something I needed to take care of. So all right. Doug, you make great guitar faces. Pure joy. Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate that, Chris. I've been thinking about trying the new Martin. Matthew, that's a really neat guitar, and the thing that's neat is you got all that neck access there, and, you know, for the traditional, quote-unquote, Martin purist, all right, yeah, you know, you've kind of got something that's not a traditional thing, but, you know, it's lovely. And, yes, I love the mid-range of a parlor guitar. They're pretty, they're small, they're out of the way. It's just a lovely, lovely, lovely sound. All right, Facebook, let's see what's going on over here. Shane. I know that Ibanez Acoustic. It's a great sounding guitar. And the funny thing is, like, literally, I remember we used to have kind of these worship nights out on the deck, and I'm strumming it without the amp, and it's just basically nothing comes out when you get a bunch of people singing. It's a funny thing, but you know, this is ironic, and I think I said this when I played that little Christmas song before, and it must have been on the mainstream Doppler's Year Garage last Wednesday, and I was commenting, you know, that sound. And that guitar is it's just transformative for me. It's just been that way. All right. For strings, I put GHS boomers on single coils and Ernie Ball cobalts on humbuckers. All right. Let's see here. Brett, thank you again for the valuable information. Of course, you always unlock the things that seem to be the mysteries. Oh, I love it. And then make them easy to get. I appreciate your depth of understanding, making it accessible for us. Brett, with great pleasure. That is my mission. The best part is when God kind of makes it just so painfully obvious. Serve others, and as they're kind of on their mission, I'm like, well, that's so much fun because you get a chance to use your gifts in the act of serving others, and that's kind of, you know, it's just what a great gift, and it's always nice to have the gift to be appreciated. So thank you for that. Okay, let's see here. I've got a couple of things that I need to attend to, so I hope you guys are not going to mind if I go a little less long tonight. I've got a really, really important studio date tomorrow, and I've got a bunch of prep that I need to do. So I want to know if there are any additional questions that people have that have been unanswered, because I want to make sure that we get them. All right, there we go. Lonnie. Oh, B&G. So, you know, the funny thing is that I have not played one of those B&Gs, but I have been very tempted. Those are lovely. Oh, you would like this. Pack. Sorry, that wasn't personal. Those are lovely. I think they're made in Israel, if I'm not mistaken, but they're supposed to be, and they have great, I mean, that's just an interesting thing, you know, they have great commercials. Like, they always make the guitars sound amazing. You're like, holy cow, right? The thing is, I don't play that much acoustic guitar in this moment. But I'm gonna need to be, and you know, hey, you know, what you guys could do, and you can ruminate on this, in addition to the gear demo thing on the Worship Musician channel, we're also, yes, I'm a dealer. Oh my. Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Is that we're looking at maybe adding some kind of song tutorial type of content. And when you think about worship song tutorials, I'll add the middle word there as opposed to worship tutorials. Our lovely friends over there. Um, it can be a range of different things. Is it acoustic guitar? Is it all the electric guitar parts of the 5 million parts that are on each one of these albums? Is it kind of dialing in, or a bunch of the folks on multi tracks are producing these producer packs of sounds, like Tyler, who was on here last week. So we're exploring some of the different things that we might do, and it would be great. Thank you very much, Brett. Much appreciate that. It would be great to kind of find out what people are really wanting and really needing in terms of, like, hey, this is the sort of stuff. We know that we need to provide some information about stuff like MIDI. Stuff, especially, for example, if you look at your average worship guitar player, many of them start either in youth bands, so they don't know anything about putting gear together, and quite often they get hand-me-downs that often are so-so. Or they start off on acoustic, and one day they're like, I want to play electric, and it's such a different world. There is kind of a unique trajectory, and we know what that is most of the time. It's not like somebody just shows up at church and decides, I'm going to play electric guitar. I want to join the worship team. I'm going to go out and buy Helix and, Veritas. It's just like, it doesn't happen like that. There's a trajectory. So, also for the people that, on your teams and you're wanting to serve, our mission is to help other worship teams and worship members and tech teams really have an easier time of it. Okay, that's a great question. Love those quotas. There we go. Hysterical. That must have been the Helix in the Bay. Love those chorus out tones. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks so much. Really appreciate that, Alan. Very kind. And Matthew, there's such a huge community. So that's kind of, it's an interesting thing. So with the Boss stuff in particular, one of the reasons I'm hanging out with those folks is, first of all, one, Jeff, the guitar products manager for Boss and Roland, is a friend. I know him from teaching at the Vi and the Satriani and the Petrucci camps. They've been a great supporter of those, and we just kind of kept being at the same camps and just kind of going, I like this guy. And Aaron, his cohort, is also awesome. So, the other thing about it is stuff like the Waza 2-amp expander. Boss isn't just making a DD2 anymore, right? They are not that there was anything wrong with Boss Stomps, but there was a period of time where brands like Strymon were kind of leaving the Boss folks in the dust. That is changing really, really fast because folks like Jeff, and by the way, Jeff was the guy who did the HD500. He did the DL4. He was at Line 6, like some of the most iconic gear. Like, arguably, with the single exception of Helix, the DL4 was one of the most iconic pieces of gear in a house of worship. Now, you may be too young to actually remember that, but there was a period of time that everybody had a DL4. It was basically the first multi-preset delay pedal on the market, and that was his baby. So they're doing some really smart stuff. So to answer your question, the answer is yes. And I think you're going to see that grow pretty quickly. I think you're going to see folks like Chris Rocha. He's going to also be a contributor in that space. And what's happened is I think the Boss stuff has been, the multi-effects side of Boss has been a little rock and roll. And the thing is that now what's happening is the algorithms, they're just so diverse across the range of sounds that it's a little less rock and roll. And so I think you are going to see that. With the headrush stuff, so here's the thing, and the thing about the headrush technology is this, is Alto Music, I think is the name of the brand, no, In Music Brands bought 11 Rack. So that technology is stuff that they bought that sounds great, but there's nobody there that's the head of R&D kind of building the next generation of if you will, Helix 3.0, the GT1000 Core. And so because of that, I think Headrush is going to see an interesting journey ahead in terms of how they're going to get to a next gen thing. Now the thing is that their FR, the 108s or whatever those are, have been exceedingly popular. So because of that, they've got some kitty in the bank, which means is they think about the next gen of what they're going to do. They have the money to actually be able to legitimize doing some serious R&D. And with stuff like the Quad Cortex coming into the market, my guess is that they're going to be feeling some growing pains and the need to step into the larger foray into the marketplace. But essentially, Headrush is 11 rack in a different box. So they're going to need, and here's one of the other conversations. Like, people love whatever they love, and then they kind of get a little fickle. It's like, oh, it's not new, it's not as good as this. I will say what the Boss people have done is kind of inconceivable. The algorithms inside here are actually tactile in nature. There's some sort of artificial intelligence thing that they've got going on with basically this interaction in the amp models and in some of the DS1 that's in there is just like, holy cow, I've got a vintage DS1 here, which is a great pedal. The DS1 that's in there is better. I never, ever would have thought I would say that, but it is. It's just a ferocious pedal. So the point being is they're figuring out some things about the tactile sense of playing stuff that they're kind of, I'd say they're kind of at the head of the class there. And like I said before, I kind of live Helix. Look around me. It's just like they're everywhere. There's my floor, my racks over there. So, but at the same time, part of my mission personally is to serve as many people as I can. Right now, Headrush is not part of that menu, but they're a good bunch of people, and they're making a really good product. All right, it's an interesting thing. First of all, the Corey One plugin is great. The real plugin that they make, the Neural DSP stuff, is the Plini plugin. It's just unreal. Just unreal. They make the best guitar plugins on the planet. The thing about the Neural stuff that Matthew, you brought up is that the higher gain settings are not super friendly for the House of Worship. I don't have one of the devices, but I can say the plugins are great. I could easily, if as long as I've got the core technology kind of under the hood, I can mess with it. I think I could probably come up with some sounds that would be really great. And it's 4 processors, so that thing has bazillions of bit smashing. Little. If you can imagine a bunch. The vision that comes to mind is a bunch of people smashing grapes with their feet inside the quad cortex. Benny, 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 like that scene out of I Love Lucy that most of you have never seen. So in any case, they're smashing grapes, and then they got a lot of feet and a lot of grapes to smash. It's pretty funny. Jet pedals. Hey, wait. Hey. What's going on? Hey, somebody mentioned you earlier. Nice to meet you. Hey, hi, welcome. Yo, hey, we're just unfortunately getting ready to jet on out of here, but nice to meet you. And awesome. So hang on, I pulled up your website. So, let's, because we're just getting ready to jet on out of here, but do me a favor, let's make friends. And so, hold on, where did I pull up that I was looking at all that grooviness? All right, it'll be in my browser history. Hang on a second. There we go. Jet pedals. There we go. So you guys are full on, like you're totally representing, which I absolutely love. It's always nice to come to a website and just see it's like, hey, we're worship folks, and we're glad to meet you. So that's awesome. And I love that little MIDI controller. That is very, 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 very cute. So we will USB class compliant. Look at all that stuff. In any case, so hey Jet, what is your name, Jet? Or maybe your name is Jet. I'm Doug. Nice to meet you. So, Matthew, thank you. All right. So, folks, um, I am going to jet on out of here because I've got stuff to do. Um, but I really, 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 really appreciate everybody hanging out. We are going to increasingly what you can expect uh, over the next period of time as we kind of refine what we're going to do. Obviously, the Q&A part is such an important part of serving this community. Um, Now, hang on a second. So, hang on. You're just like you're waving red. So, okay. So most of the stuff is high gain, but I will say that Rebecca, Afro, that dude is awesome. He is one of my favorite demo guys. First of all, he's a great player, and I think he's an exceptionally nice guy. And but yes, most of the stuff is high gain, and but they also have plenty. They have also got Corey Wong. In case you guys didn't know, Corey Wong is a believer, like full on. But at the same time, they do seem to be very interested in the metal end of things. Now, what's interesting about that is they obviously have missed the fact that it's the P-Dub folks that are keeping the lights on at Line 6. So they're going to have a very interesting trajectory as they kind of begin to kind of go, wow, there's only so many metal people. And the reality is that, I think they're going to chip away at the Fractal folks and the Kemper folks, which I think they're going to do. But, like, compared to the House of Worship, like my buddy Chris is Rebea is a beast. He and Danish Pete. There we go. Aha! See, I knew we were just little scratch and sniff. You're like, yeah, okay, I like the metal stuff. And Danish Pete's great. So there are just some great people in this space, and I love that. And I love that there is a lot of musical diversity. And actually, the great thing of Rebea is he can play lots of different styles. One of the first things I saw him doing was just destroying a Strat, playing the kind of this blues thing. Like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I'm like, wow, I love this guy. No disrespect, registered, but the thing is that there are certain products that you can really tell by the people that they go for that are very much focused. Like we're going for the metal folks, for good, bad, or in between. All right, so what I meant to finish up saying was this: is that one of the things that's happening is because I'm doing all these gear demos, trying to figure out the appropriate way to bring in some of the demo pieces of things that I'm doing such that you guys can hear some of the sounds and we can kind of talk about them and not just like, hey, here I am playing, but actually going, hey, this is what I was thinking as I was setting these tones. This is what I was doing. And increasingly, we're going to be doing that around sounds that are created for the House of Worship. And we're also going to be kind of maybe what we'll do is we'll have kind of some tiered presentation. The other thing is my other streaming show, the folks at Mission Engineering are going to do something, but I think it would be cool to get the Mission folks on there too, because more people use Mission's pedals than anybody else's expression pedal. Junior Jet Thomason, I love it. Awesome, love it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bid you a fond adieu. I will see you next Tuesday night. Jet Pedals, thanks so much for coming. It's always a pleasure to see new folks here, and we will be here 6 p.m. next Tuesday, Pacific that is. Look forward to seeing everybody then. Thanks so much, and God bless. Got to close in prayer. Holy cow. Lord, I just give thanks for community. Wow, in a year as weird as this has been, and at a time where, our sense of community and the fabric of that has been frayed, maybe lost focus, Lord, I just pray that as we hear about vaccines coming into the marketplace potentially, we get a chance to kind of go, hey, we're kind of getting a second chance to build our church communities. Let's do a better job. Let's have a better sense of inclusion of the people that sometimes maybe we don't want to hang out with. And I know it's not always easy, but you know what? It's not easy being on the outside. So Lord, I just pray that we can, kind of be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people that sometimes even when we don't feel like it, and that as a result the body grows stronger because we are building bridges, we're filling gaps, we are endeavoring to be the hands and feet. So Lord, I just pray that you equip us to be more compassionate, more understanding, more gracious, and more capable of being the hands and feet of Jesus. I just pray that our joy would increase and our ability to serve others and grow in our gifts as we serve others. Lord, that you would just continue to bless us. I just give thanks for the privilege of music, that you give us this thing that brings us so much joy, but yet, you harness it for the good of your kingdom. It just never ceases to amaze me, but that's just who you are. And so we give thanks for that, and in Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. All right, folks. Well, that was great. It's my favorite part of the show, just so you know. There's something about kind of corporate prayer that is just awesome. All right. Love you guys. God bless. I'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks again.